Students, today we are going to talk about Paul Morrell. As you know that literature reflects society, it mirrors the life of the people and in turn gets reflected by it. So when we read Sons and Lovers and come across Paul, we instantly get the idea that he is an autobiographical character. Through him, Lawrence shares his own life experience. In this novel, he relived the entire experience on the imaginative plane. Lawrence has drawn the character of Paul with intensity and sensitiveness, and his portrayal and has portrayed his conflict and suffering very poignantly. Paul is the third child of Gertrude and Walter Morrell. The marriage of his parents has already degenerated before he is born. And his mother is so much disgusted with life that she can hardly want another child. The very thought of another child coming makes her feel wretched. So he came into this world unloved. But after Paul's birth, Gertrude Morrell's mother's heart instantly moved to pity, and she resolves that, I quote, with all her force, with all her soul, she would make up to it for having brought it into the world unloved. Unquote. Paul in his childhood is rather weak and delicate, but his eyes are very bright and illumined with life. Being a sickly child, he is dependent on his mother's care and always trotted after his mother like her shadow. Thus, he forms a very deep attachment to his mother. As he witnesses the frequent quarrels between his parents, he unwittingly sides with his mother. Very silently, he shares his mother's sufferings day after day. The uncongenial domestic atmosphere affects Paul in three ways. Firstly, he often falls into fits of depression. At times, he cries without any specific reasons. Gertrude tries to reason him out of his depression and tries to amuse him. And when she fails, the father threatens to beat him. And this makes him feel even more insecure. Thus, this brutal atmosphere of the house engenders a neurotic strain in his personality. Graham Hoff, a famous critic, rightly points out that Paul's, I quote, neurotic refusal of life is the direct result of his parents' failure. Unquote. Then, second effect is that he develops an abiding hatred for his father. The very sight of his father is an irritant to him. He simply dislikes him and he don't respect him. Then thirdly, it creates as an unnatural bond of interdependence between Paul and his mother. And this leads to further complications in his emotional life. Paul's neurosis in the early years makes him very self-conscious when he grows up. He turns into a hypersensitive introvert to whom any touch with the external reality is an agonizing experience. He suffers very much from the first contact with anything. So He's totally an introvert type of a person, and he dare not try to do new things in life. But the positive aspect of his character is that he's a very good artist and also an intellectual. Paul has a very artistic bent of mind and he wins recognition as a skillful painter. He is gifted with a rare insight, and his paintings are a manifestation of his lifelong quest of inner reality. In addition to being a good artist, Paul has inherited from his mother some kind of intellectualism also. He knows French and algebra, and that he offers to teach Miriam, his girlfriend. They also read together and enjoy their favorite poems and authors. Paul's love of books is not merely academic, it is a manifestation of his intense desire to live on a higher plane of being. Then, another aspect of his life is his unnatural interdependence uh, with his mother, uh, the Oedipal relationship, their Oedipal relationship. Mrs. Morrel is the most powerful single influence on Paul's life. His early life, as also his development in youth, is conditioned by his mother's love for him. Initially, their relationship derives its strength from their interdependence on each other. Paul, being a delicate and sickly child, looks to her for protection and comfort. And Mrs. Morrel, frustrated in her married life, looks to him for emotional fulfillment. Their relationship, as long as Paul has not stepped out of his childhood, appears a very heartwarming affair. Paul shares her misery and is pleased to do something for her. But as Paul enters adulthood, he gradually becomes a husband's substitute for his mother. This Oedipal relationship between Paul and his mother destroys his capacity to love and strike healthy emotional relationships with other girls. Here, with Miriam and Clara in the novel. So, thus, at the end of the novel, we see Paul as a broken and disintegrated man. Mrs. Morrel is dead. With Miriam, he has broken off. Clara, his second girlfriend, has been restored to her husband, and he is left derelict with no one to guide his faltering step, no one to stabilize him, no one to give any emotional support to him. He is totally enveloped by an accumulated sense of emptiness, loneliness, and frustration. He cannot paint, he cannot read, he just takes to aimless wandering. But in the end, he does make a false show of courage. He decides not to give in, turns his back on the village, and walks towards the faintly humming, glowing town quickly. But as a reader, we know that after his mother's death, he is not left with any strength to cope with the realities of life. In the outline of the novel sent to Edward Garnett, Lawrence describes his hero as left, I quote, with the drift towards death, unquote, which seems to be more true of him. So, in this way, Lawrence depicted or portrayed the character of Paul Morrel, and we can very easily observe the autobiographical elements of Lawrence in this character. So, that's all for today, students. Thank you.